Alright, I've done a few videos in this series already, and this is part 3 of the worst fragrances according to you. I've got 13 fragrances in this video, plus one note that you guys absolutely hate, it seems. Find out all about them coming right up. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Sebastian. Yes, we're talking about the worst fragrances according to you. What are your worst fragrances? Put a comment down below so I can find out. And also let me know while you're at it what your worst notes are. Like, what notes do you despise and you cannot stand? If you guys aren't already aware, my least favorite note is cologne. I absolutely cannot stand the stuff. It's almost gag-inducing. It's just smell of sulfur, fish, rotten fish, seaweed, just a mixture of all those, and it really is nauseating. So I don't hate a lot of notes, but if there's any trace of cologne in a fragrance and it's an overdose of the note, I absolutely cannot stand it. But we're going to talk about fragrances that you guys hate. There's 13 of them, and I've already done 2. If you haven't caught those videos, please go catch them already, like now, before you watch this, or watch this and then go back to those to catch part 1 and part 2. But let's go ahead and get started. The first fragrance we're going to talk about is DURGA's LEATHERIZE, this one right here. So the comment I received, LEATHERIZE is the stinkiest perfume I have ever smelled in my life. It's so awful, I can't even smell it for 5 seconds. So if you don't know what LEATHERIZE is, it's a great interpretation of leather. And what is leather in the end? It's animal skin, right? So basically the stuff that you put your feet in to wear, or sometimes wear on a jacket and things like that. So that's what leather is. And leather became popular, I believe, because of the tanneries in Europe. And I guess wealthy people back then used to wear leather and things like that. Leather gloves is what I've heard, the Medicis. And one of the Medicis wore lots of gloves and they were really smelling really, really bad. So that's how the perfume industries were born, or the industry was born, especially in the Grasse area of France, where there was a lot of tanneries, which later became perfumeries. And so the smell is of the animals, burned flesh, basically. And sometimes I like that smell, sometimes I don't. For me, LEATHERIZE, I feel like, is such a real interpretation of leather. It's animalic for sure, but to me, I grew up with someone in my family that was a shoemaker designer, and so I worked around this person, a relative of mine, my uncle basically, and he created shoes, and I was working around with him around all the leather. So I come to realize how real leather smells, especially when it comes to shoemaking. This stuff to me smells just like that stuff. So if you like the idea of leather fragrances and things like that, and you haven't got your nose on this one, do get your nose on it, because I feel like it's a real interpretation of leather. But I can see some people can be put off by it because it does smell like an animal, basically. But according to the notes, there's butterscotch leather, Cistus, Cubeb, pale Orris, Cypriol, Saffron, vegan Castoreum, Myrrh, Cade oil. So Castoreum was also used to create the smell of leather in fragrances. I think it still is, but I'm not 100% sure. Probably, I don't know. I think it's inhumane. So I think this fragrance is using vegan Castoreum. But in the end, this is realistic leather. Like, it smells like a shoe shop, basically. Like, if you work in a shoe shop, you have all the shoes there, the leather smells, and there's an essence in that, place. And to me, it smells like that. So I can see why people are put off by it. But again, if you like the idea of realistic leather, definitely try LEATHERIZE. And LEATHERIZE from DURGA is a fragrance enhancer. Well, it says fragrance/enhancer. I feel like this is a fragrance on its own. I don't know how you would enhance this, add it to something even stronger to kind of give it a leathery accent to it. But to me, I feel like if you add this to another fragrance, it's going to pretty much dominate because it's so potent. Anyway, LEATHERIZE from DURGA, check it out. But the Next fragrance we're going to talk about is a cheapie from ZARA. It's Rich, Warm, Addictive in the most recent version. Rich, Warm, Addictive, I blind bought that as well. There's literally only one note in the fragrance, paraffin. Maybe a slight touch of the pina colada type coconut. Awful, really. You know, I think the current version is okay. It's decent. It's a good cheapie. Good. It used to be much better in the previous version. It was a bit more realistic. I can see that it has gotten a bit more plasticky, and the paraffin word that this person used is kind of appropriate for this. But yeah, I mean, it's a cheap fragrance, so you get what you pay for pretty much. And I recently did a video on ZARA fragrances, and I said, great fragrances created by Elias Hermanides, Honorine Blanc, and Marion Costero. I said, they smell great, but you can tell the ingredients they're using are not the best ingredients. So because they're so cheaply made, you're not going to use the most expensive ingredients or materials. You're going to use less expensive because the budget won't allow it. And it makes sense here with this fragrance. I think it smells good. It's not like, oh my God, amazing. But if you're on a budget and you want something, and I think it should satisfy. But as I said, I do get something plasticky, and this person says paraffin. I think it totally makes sense. But are you a fan of this one? Let me know. Put a comment down. And I should also ask you, are you a fan of Leatherize? Have you smelled it? I don't think it's one of the most popular DS and Durga fragrances, but I actually really, really like it. I like its potency and things like that. So next fragrance we're going to talk about is a fragrance from the house of XERJOFF. And the comment says, worst fragrance I have smelled the last years is XERJOFF's ITALICA. The milk accord is severely off-putting. Yeah, it's a lactonic fragrance for sure. This is ITALICA right here. It's a gourmand in the end. It's creamy and also almondy, toffee, vanilla, and of course milky notes. So it's kind of a very creamy, nutty experience. And with the vanilla, so you do have a, I mean, I don't think it smells off-putting, but there's also this fruitiness that comes in that they're not even crediting. And the fruit is kind of like a berry, the color of the bottle. But yeah, I think it's almost like a fruit mixed with this milky note in here, with the milky note and the fruitiness. And then you have all these other notes like the almonds and the toffee and the vanilla and things like that. So I can see some people thinking it might be not necessarily inviting. But for me, this stuff really smells great. It's a really cozy gourmand. But they do have another fragrance called Cruz del Sur too, which I like sometimes, but I hate most of the time. And that fragrance is a lactonic fragrance. That one is kind of off-putting to me most of the time, not all the time, because there are some fragrances that I like the smell of sometimes, but most of the time I don't like it, like Santal 33. But for me, ITALICA smells super amazing. I really love it. And I do enjoy its milky qualities. But, you know, it's not for everyone. Everybody has their own taste and things like that. But let me know if you're a fan of ITALICA and what do you think about it. I think it's a very popular fragrance for that house. So next fragrance, I've got two. It's actually an EDP and an extrait version of the same fragrance. It's a fragrance from the house of Marc-Antoine Barrois. It's Ganymede, this one right here. So this retailer's included a sample, and the EDP has a whiff of what reminds me of a spice that resembles a hint of body odor. It's not the fruit, so the extrait has to smell even worse for me. I had high hopes for this one. I'll revisit my decant in a few months and see if it's still a no for me. But I can see there is a bit of a spice in there that might come off like body odor. I don't get that spice. Typically, I'm a fan of cumin. Maybe, I mean, I'm very sensitive to cumin, but I don't really get cumin in here. But maybe it's some kind of a note that's creating like an accord like cumin, or something that will trick someone into making it smell like body odor. But I think it's a very popular fragrance. The EDP version, the one from 2019, and even the extrait people really seem to like it. But for me, it's all about the original, and I can see maybe perhaps the combination of the notes, and perhaps it's the immortelle that's in here. It's got that kind of dry spiciness, a bit sweet, it's a bit savory, and a bit spicy at the same time. So maybe that's what's giving off this kind of a BO-like vibe here. But do you guys get that? You know, sometimes it can also be a chemistry thing, because most people don't get that kind of a, you know, smell from a fragrance, because yeah, it doesn't have cumin. sometimes I might pick it up. It could be like maybe your chemistry, what you had that day for food, is your are you having certain things that might trigger a certain smell? So yeah, I would say come back to this fragrance and try again because it's so popular and it's a very, very sexy fragrance. I think it's one of the best niche fragrances from the last 5 years, and it's got a great following. So the reason we have an X-ray version of it is because of the popularity of this. But one more thing I should say, B683 X-ray on the other hand does have that kind of a BO-like quality. So I'm just wondering if the person actually got a sample of B683 X-ray versus Marc-Antoine Barrois Ganymede. I don't know, but again, noses are different. They pick up certain things. Something might be a bit off in there, and their sensitivity is, noticing that spiciness come through more and things like that. But I do enjoy this fragrance. I do enjoy the original more than the X-Ray, but I think the X-Ray is great too. Let me know your thoughts on this as well. Are you experiencing that kind of BO-like quality from it? Put a comment down below so I can find out. But moving on to a fragrance that's already come up several times within the last couple of these videos. And this fragrance has a major bad rap. I don't understand what it is about this one. I don't know if it's a polarizing fragrance because there's so many people that love it, but major comments come in that say, man, it's the worst fragrance. And this comment is for MANCERA's Red Tobacco. It says, I can't stand red tobacco. The DNA is headache-inducing. It projects in the worst way. And every time I open my pungent bottle, the atomizer sticks to the twist cap, exposing my nose to the whole fragrance. And it ends up being leaky when that happens, making the fragrance get on my hands. The smell lasts through a few washes of the hands. Yeah, it's a strong fragrance. And guess what? If you haven't heard already, they are coming out with an intense version of Red Tobacco if it hasn't already come out. What are they going to do with this to intensify it, make it even more beastly? Are they going to make it something as beastly as Followed by Kerosene, one that you can't wash off? That fragrance is on this list as well. Stay tuned for that. But MANCERA Red Tobacco is one of the longest lasting fragrances in my collection. It is definitely not as beastly as Followed, but it's super potent, and I think this potency is a bit off-putting to some people. So I don't know what they're going to do with the more intense version of this. Is it called Intense? I think it's called Intense. Yeah, I did a little bit section on it, because they have already done an intense version of MANCERA's Cedrat Boisé. So they're doing it with the Red Tobacco now, and these are probably the two most popular fragrances, and it's given they're going to do flankers of the most popular. Yeah, Red Tobacco is pretty popular, but yeah, it definitely has its haters as well. I do enjoy this one. I like it, but I've kind of gotten bored of it, so I'm actually kind of waiting to see what they're going to do with the intense version. But definitely, it's so potent, I can see people being irritated by it because, the smell won't go away. But what do you guys think about Red Tobacco? Put a comment down below so I can find out. But moving on to the next fragrance, we're going to the house of NISHANE with Ani. Oh man, anybody could hate Ani? Are you a lover of Ani or a hater of Ani? Do let me know. Put a comment down below. But this is what the comment says. My absolutely worst blind buy was Ani from NISHANE. Pooh! Was I disappointed with the first spray? After seeing all this amazing reviews, really a terrible scent. And I tried to give it a chance. Cold weather, warm weather, morning, night, nothing worked. Oh, and by the way, I absolutely love MANCERA perfumes, but I can understand that there are noses out there that might not enjoy the strength of the juice. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you can't love every fragrance. I don't love every fragrance. I enjoy a lot of smells, and I try to give every fragrance a chance. NISHANE's Ani is one of my favorites. It's a great creation. It's a great interpretation of vanilla with sandalwood, ginger. There's cardamom, some spices and some citrus notes and things like that. But it might be off-putting to some people. I felt like it was definitely the less medicinal take on something like Frederick Mahl's Dries Van Noten, the one that got discontinued, because that was a kind of sandalwoody fragrance with vanilla. But that one went a bit medicinal, whereas this one is definitely more inviting, more cozy, more spicy, and zingy at the same time. But I don't think it's for everyone. And what do you guys think of the Ani versus Ani X? I wonder if this person has tried Ani X. Basically, if they don't like this, they might not like Ani X. Ani X has basically been spruced up with lemons. So it's a lemony take on Ani. So if you're watching this video, the one that commented about hating this was a bad blind buy, maybe give NISHANE's Ani X a try, but get a sample before you go and buy a full bottle. But yeah, NISHANE's Ani is one of my favorite fragrances. It's a great scent, and I do enjoy wearing it. So up next, we're going with a fragrance from the house of Tom Ford. We've got 2 Tom Ford fragrances here, and I did not mention we have 2 NISHANE, I'm sorry, we have 2 MANCERAs as well. But this is Tuscan Leather, this one right here. So Tuscan Leather is kind of one of the more popular fragrances from Tom Ford, although I feel like it's kind of dominated by the hype and popularity of ombre leather because they're kind of similar. I don't understand why Tom Ford decided to do that. It's kind of like cannibalizing, you know, the fragrance with ombre leather because they're both leather fragrances, whereas Tuscan Leather could have been very popular, but ombre leather dominated. But this comment says, for me, I really enjoy Tom Ford's Cherry Smoke, Tobacco Vanille, Oud Wood, and Fleur de Portofino. But I really don't like Tuscan Leather. In my opinion, it smells like old sofa. For me, the worst Tom Ford. I can see the old sofa smell in this because in the end it could be like a leather sofa perhaps because this is a leather fragrance, and so it could have like these cloth-like, you know, characteristics or accords with the smell of the leather. For me, I feel like it's a very industrial smelling leather fragrance. It's pretty intense and potent with light fruitiness in there, and it's a fragrance that's been copied over and over again. In fact, Tom Ford copied it to create their ombre leather, and so it's just a very popular leather fragrance. But I wonder if this person that made that comment has smelled something like Leatherize. What would they think of if that smelled like, if this one smelled like old sofa? Because for me, Tuscan Leather doesn't have animalic qualities, whereas Leatherize does, and other leather fragrances can definitely have that animalic quality. But Tuscan Leather, to me, smells more industrial rather than animalic, but that could be off-putting as well. It smells greasy, oily, rough, mechanical, and industrial. That's the kind of smell it is. It's a great leather fragrance. It's very popular, but I feel like, again, ombre leather has kind of pretty much dominated and took over its popularity because it is less expensive and it's a, you know, a great scent. But either way, I can see people, you know, saying this one smells like an old sofa. It's got this kind of old smell to it, kind of, I guess. Anyway, Tuscan Leather from Tom Ford. Let me know your thoughts on Tom Ford's Tuscan Leather. Are you a fan of it? Do you prefer ombre leather over Tuscan Leather? Because ombre leather is much cheaper than Tuscan Leather. But moving on to the second MANCERA fragrance. This one came up again. I don't know. This is one of the most hated fragrances from MANCERA. It's Hindu Kush. So Hindu Kush is my #1 favorite MANCERA. Red Tobacco is my second favorite MANCERA, and it's 2 of the most hated MANCERA fragrances according to the comments I received, because I've featured this in the previous videos as well. And this is, to me, one of the most unusual cannabis fragrances in that the cannabis in this doesn't necessarily smell like that kind of weird cannabis-like smell. But this says, Hindu Kush is my worst blind buy. Thank God I only bought the 2 ounce, and it's sitting here waiting for a buyer. I think it's super sexy. It's a great fragrance. The cannabis doesn't really smell like a cannabis to me. Not like some other cannabis fragrances where they have that kind of camphoric smell. This to me smells a bit more like a greenness running throughout, this kind of very creamy, woody, vanillic kind of a fragrance. It's cannabis, incense, woods, spices, patchouli, amber, gaiac wood, vanilla, lavender, and white musk. To me, in the heat, it smells really great. It comes alive. It opens up and blooms, leaves a great trail. The heat does that. And I think this might just be not a very pleasant fragrance to some people. Maybe the cannabis as a smell is not really a popular note in fragrances. It's not a very inviting smell, I think. But I absolutely love this one. It's, again, my favorite MANCERA fragrance. Although I haven't worn it for a while. There's so much fragrance I have access to. But if I was to rank a list, I'd put this at #1. In fact, I did a top 20 list recently. If you haven't caught that video of MANCERA top 20 fragrances, go catch it. You'll find out more information about this. But let me know if you're a fan of Hindu Kush. Do you enjoy it or do you hate it? And then moving on to a fragrance from the house of Mind Games. It's Checkmate, this one right here. Are you familiar with Checkmate? So it says, worst, latest for me, Mind Games Checkmate. Smells like the inside of an old leather handbag, that rancid rose split all over them. It sat in a closet for decades. I can see that, I guess. This fragrance to me is kind of like an inspired fragrance from Portrait of a Lady. So it's got a very chypre vibe. Patchouli and lots of roses. It's very rosy, it's very spicy, light fruitiness in there, and a bit of fizziness from the champagne note. Light booziness comes in from Davana. I think the Davana in here creates this kind of a green boozy vibe, which is really, really delicious. There's also tobacco in this. But maybe it's just overwhelming. I don't know what it is, but I don't get leather from it. So I wonder where they got that kind of bag, idea of a bag or a leather bag, and then the roses, drying up in it. And noses are different, so they can do different things. But I do enjoy this one. In fact, it's one of my favorites from this collection. I think it's because it's got that whole Portrait of a Lady thing going for it, but it's super potent, smells amazing, and I like it. But do let me know if you're a fan of Checkmate. What are your thoughts? Do you get the Portrait of a Lady similarities? Let me know, put a comment down. Next up, going to the house of Maison Francis Kurkdjian, it's Oud Satin Mood, this one right here. So the comment that came in, for me, one perfume that I really try to like is MFK Oud Satin Mood. I can't stand it. It smells lactonic with some kind of herbs. No oud, no vanilla. And if we talk about notes, the worst for me is tomato leaves note. Oh my god, can't handle, not for a second. I don't want to get into the tomato leaf note, but going back to this is probably the easiest oud fragrance from the Maison Francis Kurkdjian oud line. And he's right, or she. I don't get much oud from this. For me, it's mostly about vanilla, rose, and violets, and there's definitely a makeup effect in here. The combination of the rose and the violet together creates this makeup vibe, kind of a sweet makeup vibe. But I could see the oud being pretty, minute amounts in there, not necessarily overwhelming. And again, this is the Oud Satin Mood, and it's the least oud. For me, I absolutely loved Cashmere Oud from this line. Really loved it. And I think currently probably Oud Extrait and also the Silk Mood Extrait are the best. But this is really good. But I'm not going for this. I'm not pulling this for the oud because they're totally right. It doesn't come off too potent here. Oud is afterthought for me. It's basically rose, violet, and vanilla with amber and benzoin and oud kind of competing with one another for, the fourth spot in the dominancy in the notes. But yeah, it's very popular. Everybody seems to love it. Do you guys get the makeup effect with this one? Every time I see rose and violet together, there's definitely this kind of a makeup-y vibe. Let me know if you get that. This is the EDP, by the way. I haven't really tested the extrait, but I do enjoy it, even though it's not necessarily very oud-like. But moving on to the next fragrance, we've got Cosé from the house of Pierre Guillaume. So this comment came in. It says, for me the worst frag I've ever tried was Pierre Guillaume Cosé. That hemp note with the patchouli nearly made my run away from myself. For me it's too dank and I literally felt like I'd piss hot on a drug test. LOL. Have a great day. So this was my very first purchase of a fragrance from the house of Pierre Guillaume. It was when I didn't buy a lot of fragrances and I had a job and I didn't have a budget for fragrances, so I was on a trip to France, and in the south of France there was a perfume shop, and I went and discovered the line. She gave me samples, the woman. I tested them and went back and bought a bottle of Cosé. I like the whole cannabis thing. I like the tobacco. I like the patchouli, plus there's the dark chocolate. So kind of like a gourmand wannabe, not necessarily. It's patchouli, it's cannabis, so it's got a bit of daring edge to it. Maybe like the kind of the 60s hippies kind of a theme with the dark chocolate kind of a thing. I enjoy this fragrance, but I can see that once again that cannabis note could be very off-putting. And for me, when I compare these two, both of these have cannabis. I get more of a cannabis camphoric vibe with the Pierre Guillaume than I get with the MANCERA, but everybody's noses are different. What do you guys get? And do you enjoy Cade? Are you a fan of this line? It's a very underrated line. I think he's a great perfumer. It's just not very hype. He does great work, and I think this is definitely one of his greatest creations. He's done a lot of great fragrances. Maybe we'll have to do a list, like a list of Pierre Guillaume fragrances. But let me know your thoughts on Cade. Let me know your thoughts on the entire line. I'd like to find out. Next, we've got an older classic Tom Ford fragrance, and then we got one more after this. This is for the fragrance Noir Anthracite. This comment says, this fragrance would smell perfect on a dead corpse, because this is absolutely horrible. One of the worst fragrances I have smelled in my lifetime. 10 thumbs down. Is it that bad? Does this smell like a corpse, or would it be better to be on a corpse? I think it was a bomb. Nobody really cared for it, and it was probably because people thought that with this fragrance. It smells very classic. It's a great fragrance. It's created by Honorine Blanc, by the way, who I just spoke about in that ZARA video. She did the antique fragrance. So she's a great perfumer, and she did a great job here, but this was a complete fail. Complete fail. They went, it came and went so fast. It launched at the same time as Oud Mineral. Both of them got discontinued, but remember, Oud Mineral is coming back. But Oud Mineral outlived Noir Anthracite. To me, it reminded me a little bit of Halston Z14. It's got that chypre vibe, a classic men's chypre style, and it's a bit leathery. It's definitely green. It's a bit bitter. Patchouli, just very kind of classic masculine powerhouse-ish kind of a fragrance, but not for everybody, and I could see that comment totally. Anyway, this is Noir Anthracite. Let me know if you're a fan of that one. I'd like to find out. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about Followed by Kerosene. So this comment came in. Again, there's this controversy that the fragrance has been reformulated. It's not nuclear. I don't know where this controversy is coming from. I don't get it. The fragrance I have here, I will not spray in this studio ever again. And this is proof that this fragrance is beast mode. Unfortunately, I bought this perfume this week. Was the worst I've ever had, and it really lasts forever. Just use 2 sprays and you will smell fenugreek the whole week. I think this perfume contains a big amount of scotalone, caramel furanone, which has a beast performance with caramel and fenugreek smell. I don't recommend this perfume. It's literally, I went to Europe for a whole month. When I had this fragrance, I sprayed it when I was wearing a jacket because it was early in the year. That jacket has not been worn since I took the jacket with me to Europe. It still smelled like this fragrance. That is how strong it is. I can't get that smell off the jacket. I don't know what to do, and I don't want to wash the jacket because it's an expensive jacket. I don't want to dry clean it because it's kind of on the nylon side. I just can't get the smell off. It's that long lasting. And the fragrance also gets on everything. I sprayed in the air and it gets on my pants. I had to dry clean my pants 3 or 4 times to get the smell off. But the jacket, it's still on there. And every time I'd open my suitcase, I'd smell this fragrance. It's that strong. Again, I don't know where that controversy comes from. People say it's no longer the same. It's been reformulated. I don't get that because this stuff is beast mode. Anyway, that's Kerosene's Followed. Let me know your thoughts on that fragrance. Have you sampled it? Do you get the beast mode qualities? It lasts for days and days and days and days and days. You can wash your hands. You have to wash them multiple times to get it off of you. It's that strong. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on these fragrances. Do you like them? Do you hate them? What are some fragrances that you consider the worst fragrances? Worst blind buys, worst fragrances ever, worst smelling, and then some worst notes as well. But either way, thanks so much for watching. Please catch the previous versions of this video so you can find out more about other fragrances. Other than that, guys, please like this video. Please share it. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook. And I'll be back with more videos very soon. Have a good one. Goodbye. So once again, patchouli gets a bad rap. I don't get how people really can't stand this note of patchouli. It's my absolute favorite note, but going through my comments, I noticed that I had received a couple of comments that really people did not care for it. So one of the comments said, patchouli is the worst smell in any fragrance. Disgusting. I'd like to find out from this person what kind of fragrances they like, because most fragrances, do contain some amount of patchouli. It's a nice backbone to a fragrance, and it does make the fragrances last longer. It's a very earthy, woody smell. Can go a bit chocolatey. This other comment says, sad to say that patchouli is like Voldemort to me. Just awful. Even the tiniest amount ruins a scent for me. I mean, I'd like to find out from these people what their favorite fragrances are, because, like I said, patchouli is in a lot of fragrances. Sometimes not as much as, you know, other fragrances, but most of the time there's patchouli in a fragrance just to give it some life, some depth, some intensity. And patchouli to me is the most amazing note because it has the longevity that I like, the sillage that I enjoy, and I love that earthy smell. It's got a very earthy smell. It's woody and earthy. And again, some patchouli fragrances will smell like chocolatey, chocolate cakey. Some goes into the green direction. So there's a lot that can be done with patchouli, but unfortunately, not for everybody. But anyway, if you're a fan of patchouli, let me know. If you're a hater of patchouli, let me know. Let me know what other notes you hate and what notes you love. Put a comment down below so I can find out. See you guys later. Bye.